The new NIDS bill has been drafted and is ready for review. We want to hear from you. Go to www.japarliament.gov.jm to download a copy of the new bill. Join the conversation. Make a written submission to Clerk to the Houses, Gordon House, 81 Duke Street, Kingston, or via email clark@japarliament.gov.jm. All written submissions must be sent by Friday, January 29, 2021. Join the process. Let your voice be heard.
Welcome to viewers and listeners who have joined us to our 5th Joint Select Committee virtual town hall meeting. Tomorrow will be the 6th and last of the series. The meeting is in progress and we will continue. I am Delroy Chuck, Chairman of the Joint Select Committee. Today we have all the members joining us online or in the banquet hall here at Jamaica House. Just like to introduce the two members who are presently here, Minister Marsha Smith, Dwight Sibbles, MP, and very shortly we expect Minister Johnson Smith and also Senator Charles Sinclair, who I spoke with. They're actually in traffic and will join us very shortly. Now, today's session is generally for members of the public to engage us, and they can send as many questions as possible. We have reached out to other groups, religious groups, and other groups to participate and to send questions, messages, as the case may be, as well as Jamaicans not only here, but also those abroad. May I emphasize that these Joint Select Committee meetings are not only intended for parliamentarians and for those who are listening to us, but for everyone. You can engage this Joint Select Committee meeting on this NIDS bill. I want to bring up to date that so far we have received a total of 19 written submissions to Parliament, and we expect that there will be others who will make contributions. We are extending the date for these written contributions from January the 29th to the middle of February, February the 15th. After that, we will close all written contributions. After tomorrow's meeting, we will take a week's break, and we expect on the 11th of February for the Joint Select Committee to meet in Parliament, at which time we will be inviting some of the written contributors to appear before us. And so over a period between the end of February, March, if necessary, April, we will get these written contributions assessed, and the contributors will have the opportunity to engage directly, face-to-face, the members of the committee, so that those written contributors who still intend to send in their written questions and written concerns, please do so by the 15th of February. Now, we have also, the Joint Select Committee and the NIDS Secretariat have been involved in other informational teaching sessions. So on Monday and Tuesday of this week, the team from the NIDS Secretariat, and briefly myself, engage a number of justices of the peace virtually. And Monday we had over 240 JPs, and on Tuesday we had over 205 JPs who participated fully. And if necessary, we can have more sessions. To those justices of the peace who are listening and who have not participated as yet, we have another session on Friday at 12:30, so you can sign up to participate in another more rigorous examination of the bill, because we want the justice of the peace to be the resource persons in all the communities, so that any concerns that community members in the rural, any area of Jamaica that may have, we expect that they can consult the justice of the peace and be able to bring these concerns to us. This evening, we welcome Minister Johnson Smith, who has just arrived, having to migrate through the traffic. And we also have members of the NIDS team who are here with us. Mr. Warren Vernon, the Program Director, Mrs. Janelle Miller-Williams, the Senior Legal Officer in the Prime Minister's Office, Mrs. Sharika Hemmings-Allison, the Principal Director, the Office of the Prime Minister, and we have Ms. Kamika Facey online with us. Now, as usual, our TV moderator, the person who will be keeping us at the banquet hall in touch with all the viewers and listeners who have their questions and concerns, our wonderful TV moderator, Ms. Kimberly Hall, to take us through the rest of the program.
Thank you, Minister. Allow me to welcome you once again to the 5th Joint Select Committee Virtual Town Hall on the National Identification System, NIDS. I am Kimberly McLeod, and I want to take the opportunity to extend a warm welcome to those watching us on CVM TV, PBCJ, GIS TV, Scene TV, and of course on social media on the NIDS Facts pages, the Prime Minister's Twitter and Facebook pages, and that is at Andrew Holness JM, and of course to our listeners on Roots FM and those tuning in via other media outlets. Over the last 2 weeks, the public has been engaged in learning more about the NIDS and the National Identification and Registration Bill 2020. Now, over the next couple of minutes, we will continue sharing with you the contents of the new voluntary National Identification and Registration Bill 2020. Please remember to use the hashtag JSCNIDS to participate on social media. But before we begin today's session, let's do a quick recap of what we would have learned so far about the proposed bill and the National Identification System. And so we will watch this video now.
You've probably heard of the National Identification System, or NIDS. Here are a few facts to help you understand even better.
What is the NIDS?
The National Identification System, or NIDS, is made up of the National Identification Databases, the National Identification Number, or NIN, the National Identification Card, or the NIC, and all the processes, networks, services, and measures associated with the enrollment of the individuals and the verification of identity.
What are the objectives of the NIDS bill?
The proposed objectives of this bill include providing for the enrollment of eligible individuals in the National Identification Databases, the assignment and use of the NIN or NIN, and the issue of an NIC or NIC to enrolled individuals, and the prevention of identity theft and other types of fraud relating to identity information. The NIDS is proposed to create a secure and reliable way of proving the identity of enrolled individuals through the use of a single document, a National Identification Card.
So how can I sign up for enrollment?
Citizens of Jamaica and individuals who are resident in Jamaica will be eligible for enrollment. A resident is one who has lived in Jamaica for a continuous period of 6 months immediately prior to applying for enrollment, or if the individual has been granted permission under immigration laws to enter and remain in Jamaica for the purpose of study.
How can I sign up?
Eligible individuals may apply to the authority for enrollment. The authority will be required to inform the individual that enrollment is voluntary and that the individual may cancel enrollment at any time. The authority will also be required to say why the information is being collected, the purpose for which the information will be used, the steps to be taken by the authority to verify the information, the individual's right of access to the information, and the right of the individual to appeal any decision made by the authority concerning the identity information of that individual. The bill takes into account the different types of individuals who may wish to enroll. For example, minors, individuals who are in places of safety, persons in correctional institutions, mentally incapable individuals, and those who are in the Witness Protection Program. For the purposes of enrollment, it is proposed that biographic, biometric, and numerical information may be required to be collected by the authority. The biographic information of the individual includes their full name, their date of birth, whether the individual is male or female, their marital status, as well as their occupation. The biometric information refers to the facial image, fingerprints, and manual signature where the applicant is 18 years and older. By way of numbers, the individual's taxpayer's registration number, passport number, or electoral registration number may be collected where applicable.
What's the idea behind an NIN?
Now, the National Identification Number, or NIN. It is proposed that a unique NIN will be permanently assigned, and the National Identification Card, or the NIC, will be issued to every enrolled individual whose information has been verified by the authority. The NIN will be randomly selected, and the digits will not relate to any attribute of the enrolled individual. The number will not be assigned or reassigned to any individual. It is unique to you. Importantly, the NIN may not be cancelled and remains assigned to one individual even after that person has died. The NIC, or the card, is proposed to be the proof of identity of the enrolled individual, which will not be transferable to any other person.
If I sign up, can I cancel at any time?
An enrolled individual may request cancellation of enrollment at any time, and the authority must cancel the enrollment. Where the cancellation is upon the request of the individual, it is proposed that the identity information will no longer be processed unless the authority is mandated to do so under the Data Protection Act. It may also cancel enrollment if the information in the National Identification Database is inaccurate. Once enrollment is cancelled, the authority must advise the individual of the cancellation, and that person is no longer entitled to use the NIN. Additionally, the NIC, or the card issued to that individual, must be surrendered. If the individual chooses to re-enroll, that person will be issued with the same NIN.
I feel like every time I watch that video, I learn something new. It's just a very comprehensive video, and I'm sure those of you who are watching us appreciate just how detailed that is. If you are just joining us, we just concluded a quick recap on the NIDS, and we will now take a few questions. But before we do, I wanted to remind you that if you are unsure of how to access the bill, you may visit the website of the Parliament of Jamaica, and you'll find it simply by clicking on Publications, and then you'll click on Bills, and then you'll click on Public Bills, and you'll scroll through and you'll find the National Identification and Registration Act, and we do encourage you to read through it, get informed, and please do get involved in the discussion. So as far as questions go, we did have some questions from last week's engagement, and the first of those questions is, how will the card be verified by the authority? And I direct this question to the experts.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kimberly. I'll take that one. Clause 25 of the bill has provisions for the authentication of a national identification number or a national identification card. And when we say the authentication, what we're basically making reference to for the authentication is really to check the card. The regular man on the street, when you authenticate, you're basically checking the card to see if the card was in fact issued by the state. And you're also checking to ensure that the face that is on the card is in fact the same person that is in the National Identification and Registration Authority's databases. So there are a number of ways. There are a number of ways to verify a card, but I will just quickly share two use cases. And the first one is the traditional way, that we are all accustomed to, which is the face of the card, where someone appear before you, present the card, and you check to see what is on the face of the card. While this is something that is practiced now because of the secure nature of the national identification card. We would encourage persons to always verify the card with the authority. But how do you verify the card with the authority? We'll have a simplified version where you can go to the authority's website and you will be able to type in the NIN and the information that is on the face of the card, and all you'll get is a match or a mismatch. The system won't reveal or disclose any information at all. All it will confirm really is, yes, this card is in the government's databases. Additionally, there's a more complicated way or process, and this one is the automated way, where financial institutions, government entities, private sector entities will be able to integrate or to connect with our system through predefined protocols. And they would be referred to as accredited organizations. Once you appear in a private sector entity or a government entity, the first step with this process is that you must give your permission for your information to be disclosed or for your identity to be verified. Once that is done, you will punch in your PIN, because you need to punch in your PIN to authenticate the transaction. Once that is done, the system will store a log of that event. You will also be notified, and the information will be disclosed to the entity. So those are the two methods that will be used. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vernon. And again, I am quite impressed, and I believe that the technical team and the committee have thought of almost everything that could possibly be asked, anticipated all the potential issues, and has taken a very proactive response to them. So my next question is, will small businesses who fail to authenticate IDs be presented to them be held criminally liable? So if a small business fails in their efforts to authenticate these IDs, what obtains?
Okay, so if we look at clause 25 of the bill, which speaks to the authentication and verification of identity information, you will see that the bill does not propose to make it a criminal offense if the business fails to authenticate the card that is presented to them. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the safest route is to always authenticate the card with the authority.
Right. All right. Thank you. And so when someone accesses another person's information, which I do believe we did ask this before, but just for completeness and so that people understand that we are very happy to respond over and over again as many times as is necessary to their questions. When someone accesses another person's information, can other people in the system see what it is that they've accessed and see how long that they would have been on those records?
Okay, I'll take that one.
Yes.
So Kimberly, we always want to try and connect our answers with a section of the bill. So under clause 24 and 25 of the bill, the verification of identity and the verification of a NIN, or a national identification card, as mentioned earlier, ought to be done at the request of the identity owner. This is very, very important. The request ought to be done at the request of the identity owner. And why am I saying ought to be done? Because what I'm about to say is that we are putting in place controls to prevent that. Because while there's a law and there are established processes for people to follow, you must put in place controls to hold them accountable. So we are going to enforce this by ensuring that every time the identity information is verified, there's a log, and there's a timestamp attached to that log, and it is protected by blockchain to prevent any officer, irrespective of their rank in the authority, from deleting that log, and the identity owner will be notified. This is going to bring a new level of transparency in the country that we have never seen before. So it is important for us to place emphasis on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vernon. So every time someone accesses your information, you will be notified, and there is a very important.
Sorry.
One moment.
Yes, no, just making the point that it's not that they never access your information, that no one accesses your information, but every time they ask for the card to be verified,
Right.
then it goes to.
Right.
So it is
And the
not
notification is
accessing
sent.
information. It's
Right.
a verification,
It's a verification
of the information.
process, right.
Because we want the public at large to appreciate the only persons who have access will be the authority, the NIDS authority, and no one else.
Right. And even those persons will have to follow those checks and
They'll
balances.
follow the checks and
Yes,
balances.
Right. All right. Before I continue with the questions, I just want to take the time to acknowledge Minister Robert Morgan and, of course, Senator Charles Sinclair. So the next question that we've been asked to respond to is, what are the circumstances under which a person's data or information can be destroyed? And again, to the technical team.
So if we look at clause 14 of the bill, under this clause, it is proposed that where the individual's enrollment has been cancelled because the individual is not eligible for enrollment, or where the authority becomes aware that the individual's identity information that is stored in the databases is inaccurate, the authority must cancel the NIC in those circumstances and ensure that the identity information pertaining to that individual is removed from the databases. Clause 14 of the bill also proposes that in a situation where the enrollment of the individual is cancelled upon the request of that individual, the authority must cancel the card and cease to process the identity information of that person.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I must also acknowledge our Attorney General, who is joining us via Zoom this afternoon. I do want to ask this very important question, and we did spend some time last time in respect of what obtains where there are any breaches in terms of jail time or fines. And the question is, if a person is unable to pay the fines listed in law, will there be jail time?
No. A very important question. Last time, and we have discussed on previous occasions, there are many penalties in this bill to ensure the protection and securing of information, so that one particular offense is where past employees or present employees reveal information unlawfully. And that is where the fine goes up to $3 million, and the suggestion has been put, and we will be discussing it when we deliberate, whether in fact there should be an alternative of an actual prison term. So it's fine or fine and confine.
Yes.
But most of the other penalties involve lesser offenses, such as where a person tried to use another person's identification card. And these fines go up to as much as $1 million. And what Section 28 of the bill provides for is that where the fine is up to $1 million, the Supreme Court or the parish court judge, as in most cases, will have the opportunity, instead of a fine or confine, it will be a fine or a community service order under Section 10 of the Criminal Justice Reform, community service order.
Yes.
So what it means is that a person may try to use another person's card. He's charged and he's fined $500,000. He can't pay. In a normal court situation, he goes to jail. But what Section 28 provides is that the court may well, in lieu of jail time, insists or provides for that person to do community service. So it's not that we want to send these offenders to jail. We just want to use that penalty to ensure that they do not breach the provisions of this law.
Yes. Thank you so much, Minister, for making that point. And of course, what I took from that is that in any event, there will be some consequence.
Absolutely.
Some consequence. Thank you so much. Another question. If it is I am no longer a Jamaican citizen, will my information be removed from the database?
Is if the individual is no longer a citizen of Jamaica, or if the individual is no longer ordinarily resident in Jamaica, the individual's personal information will be removed from the database.
Yes. Okay. But if they were to reapply, they would be given the same NIN,
the same
correct?
NIN,
Right,
yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. See, I'm learning so much just by participating here myself. All right, and so where in the law are institutions empowered to rely on NIDS as opposed to requesting all those documents from a customer? And I suspect they may be referring to requesting your TRN and your voter's ID or your passport. Where in the law are institutions empowered to rely on the NIDS to the technical team?
So if we look at Clause 19 of
Yes.
the bill, which speaks to the content of the National Identification Card, we'll see that it proposes to make provision for the card to be proof of the particulars that are on the card. So once the card is presented, the card is sufficient proof of the individual's identity.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
If I may just add to
Yes, Minister.
Kimberly. We have been emphasizing that the NIDS card is going to be so useful that people will want it, and that is the intention. So, you know, a number of questions have come to us repeatedly. Why have a NIDS card? Why not just use the passport or the electoral identity card? The truth of the matter is that this NIDS card is going to subsume all of the other cards. So rather than you taking the electoral card or the passport to do different business, this NIDS card will be the one that will be the most effective to utilize. And if I might say this, we are in discussion and we hope they will visit us perhaps tomorrow. I think we are going to get PICA tomorrow, and also the Registrar General, PAG, a number of other institutions.
Tax Administration Jamaica.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
To really explain how this NIDS card will reduce or improve the efficiency in these government agencies.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Minister. And the students, I do remember us talking about at what point persons may be able to submit biometric information. So I think we said at 6 is where it starts, but you can correct me on that. I don't want to put that information out there if it is not verified. But also in respect of students, will they be able to enroll, and what is the process for them? How is it different, or how is it similar?
Okay, so I'll start and maybe Warren will chip in, but we should bear in mind that the scheme of the NIDS system is a voluntary one, it's not mandatory. And this means that though it's not a requirement, it is something that persons should desire because of the vast amount of benefits that will accrue should you enroll. The card will be for anyone who has chosen to enroll. And once enrolled in the NIDS, the student can use the card to enroll in an educational institution with, of course, the consent of his or her parent or guardian.
Okay, thank you. Anything to add, Mr. Vernon? No?
Well, just to say that the enrollment process is the same.
Yes.
The only difference here is that an adult can go to an enrollment site and enroll in the system, but a minor will require the permission from an adult or the parent or guardian in order to enroll. Mm-hmm. So that's important to know.
Okay.
Let's not ignore what happens now to Kimberly. When a child is to be enrolled in a primary school or prep school or high school or at a tertiary institution, they have to bring some identification. Oftentimes, many of them don't have a passport. They don't have an electoral card. Right. They have no identification. So this is an opportunity where the parents or guardian have enrolled these students, these young people, that they have a card which will make it extremely easy for them to access the educational institutions.
Yes. So the same convenience that the card would afford adults, it would afford children who have been granted the permission by their guardians to enroll. So I do want to ask, it seems to be a rather futuristic question, but I want to ask it nonetheless. Will we be able to travel to other countries using our NIDS card?
Okay, I'll take that one. What I can say at this point in time is that there is no policy direction for it to be used as a travel document. However, national identification cards are designed using the International Civil Aviation Organization standards, so it can be used in the future if the government should move in that policy direction. And I also want to add that there are a number of countries that are already doing this. All of the countries in South America, they use their national ID to travel between those countries. And in Europe too, you can also use it. I guess, they're sort of modeling this off what happened in the United States, where if you have a real ID compliant ID, then you can travel between the states.
Right.
So let's see what the policy direction will be, but whatever it is, this card took into consideration all of the future requirements.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And so even if not internationally, there's the possibility that we may be able to travel regionally, or certainly within CARICOM, with this card. That is aspirational. Yes? All right. A concern here expressed. Will a person be able to access all government, community, and public services, if that person does not voluntarily register for the NIDS? Will they still be able to access their services as usual?
And the answer is yes, because NIDS is a voluntary program. However, we always like to add that if you have a national ID, then you will get more efficient services, information that you're required to present, multiple pieces of information, you will not be required to do so.
Yes. All right, thank you. And we do have another question, and this will be my last one for now before we go into the different clauses. And it is in respect of the biometric information. People are still asking, and I know we did go through it again, but we have no challenges going through it as many times as needed. What is the totality of the biometrics that will be required to enroll in the NIDS?
Okay. So,
yes.
Your fingerprints, for those who have fingerprints, because there will be some people without fingerprints, and a facial image or a picture of your face, and your manual signature. If you can sign, if you can't sign, then you just place an X.
Yes.
And that will be sufficient.
All right. Thank you. All right. And so now we will be proceeding to discuss clause by clause as per our agenda for today. And we want to continue at clause 26. And I'm going to ask Mrs. Williams to lead us in that one.
Yes. Thank you for that, Kimberly. Good afternoon, Chairman, other members of the committee, colleagues, and to the general public. In respect of Clause 26 of the bill provides for the establishment of an appeal tribunal to hear appeals. Where an enrolled individual is aggrieved at the decision of the authority in respect of any identity information, then the enrolled individual may appeal to the appeal tribunal by filing a notice of appeal within 28 days after the communication of the decision, or any such longer period as may be approved by the appeal tribunal. I must also note that in the second schedule of the bill, it speaks to the constitution of the appeal tribunal. And it is proposed that the appeal tribunal may consist of 1 or 2 panels as the need arises. And each panel shall have three individuals, one of whom shall be a retired judge of the Supreme Court or Court of Appeal. Furthermore, in the schedule, it states that each panel shall be appointed by the Governor General after consultation with the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition.
circumstances under which a person should come to need an appeal? What are some circumstances under which an appeal
Okay,
may
for
be
example,
required?
if their enrollment has been cancelled, or if their national identification card has been cancelled, or any other decision of the authority that has aggrieved that enrolled individual, they can always appeal that decision.
Okay. Is it possible for a person to be refused enrollment into the NIDS on application to enroll?
If they can be refused?
Yes, they can be refused. One, if you attempt to steal someone's identity, if you are unable to provide the information that is required as per what is in the proposed bill, then you will be refused.
Yes, okay, thank you. Did you outline for us the notice of appeals process?
Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, thank you so much. And so now we will move on to clauses 28 and 29. And I direct that once again. Or do you have a comment, Mrs.
Yes,
Williams?
sure. No.
Okay.
Going back to the notice of appeal.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so the notice of appeal shall state clearly the grounds of the appeal and shall be accompanied by copies of any supporting documents. Thereafter, the notice of appeal and the supporting documents shall be served on the authority and the inspectorate.
Yes.
Right? And in terms of the process, within 7 days after the authority has received the notice of appeal, the authority shall provide the appeal tribunal with a statement in writing setting out the reasons for their decision. Furthermore, after receiving the notice of appeal, the appeal tribunal may direct the authority or the appellant, meaning the person that is filing the notice of appeal, to provide them with any relevant information to help them in their determination for their decision.
Yes.
And also the appeal tribunal shall inform all parties of the date of the hearing, and also that the party may appear in person or send a representation on their behalf, as well as to summon any witnesses that are necessary for the purpose of the hearing.
Right. And how long do you anticipate or do you project the appeals process to be? Do you have any idea, or that's just relative? That's subject to the circumstances at the time?
For the process?
Yes.
I would say it is relative.
Yeah?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
All right. Thank you. Before we continue looking at clauses 28 and 29, I do want to take a comment or a question, I believe, from our Attorney General, who is, again, tuned in via our Zoom link. AG? If the okay.
AG, you're on.
Do we have that question from, or comment from the AG? All right. All right. So we're just going to continue, and then we'll come back to the AG. Mrs. Williams?
Furthermore, after the hearing, then the appeal tribunal may dismiss the appeal and confirm the decision of the authority, allow the appeal and set aside the decision of the authority, vary the decision of the authority, or allow the appeal and direct the authority to arrive at a fresh decision.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mrs. Williams. And I believe you will also take us through clauses 28 and 29?
29,
okay.
yes,
Thank you so much. Please go right ahead.
Okay.
All right.
So clause 28 of the bill speaks to special provisions in respect of offenses. In respect of this clause, where there is no specific penalty for a person who commits an offense, in the bill, the person shall be liable on conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $1 million. Furthermore, this clause provides for the minister to amend any monetary penalties. And with respect to offenses in the bill, this clause provides for alternative measures for the offender to provide community service if they are unable to pay a fine, as mentioned before by the chairman.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. And now, in respect of clause 30, we have been aware that there has been much debate and concern about the confidentiality and secrecy of the information that is collected. Could you help us to clear up some of those, misunderstandings in respect of how the information will be kept confidential?
Confidential, okay. Thank you very much. So in respect of clause 30, it speaks of the secrecy and confidentiality. And it provides for where every person who has or who has had an official duty in respect of this bill, who is or has been employed in the administration, or to whom information is communicated under this bill, shall treat as secret and confidential all information communicated, and shall not disclose such information except as provided for in this bill or necessary for due administration. And a person who commits an offense, if the person breaches a duty of secrecy or confidentiality, and shall be liable on conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $3 million.
Right. All right. And we did speak last time about it being, the information being stored on different servers and being very encrypted and just completely secure. Yes. We did address that last time. All right. I do have a question here. And I believe we did mention it at the last meeting, but in respect of the number that you're assigned on your national ID card and the number that is on your birth certificate, is there any way that the two numbers will at any time be consolidated, and so your NIN number is the one that is associated with your birth certificate?
Okay, I'll take that one. Currently, the birth certificate, there is no unique identifier on the birth certificate. There's no universal unique identifier on the birth certificate. And again, we have to remember that the national ID is really voluntary, so we can't mix the two. You must volunteer in order to enroll before we can make any link or connection to secure your birth certificate. So again, because the civil registry, as it is now, there is no unique identifier. It is going to be very difficult, and it is for that reason why we currently don't link birth with death records. It's the same reason why what the civil registry is doing now is really capturing, as required by law, the registration of death. And this is why you have instances where persons will steal a dead person identity. However, once you enroll in the NIDS program, we will be able to facilitate the link and secure that birth certificate from abuse or from identity theft.
Yes.
And that is very important to note.
All right, thank you so much. So the reason, which is a very sensible one, is that you're entitled to your birth certificate at birth, but the NIDS is voluntary, and therefore for those reasons, the two will not be connected in terms of one unique identifier for both. Mm-hmm. Right? All right. I believe our Attorney General is ready now, and we will go ahead and take her comment. AG? Just a moment, AG. We are working on the audio.
Please repeat.
Yes. I was saying, AG, that we will go ahead and take your comment now.
I was saying to you that yes, at the time you were referring to me, the audio was going in and out, and so I was not able to hear you.
Right.
So may I have you repeat the comment, please? Or are you speaking about the comment that I had made in the chat?
That you want to make.
The comment that you wish to make, AG.
Ah.
Yes.
At the time when the comment related to Minister pointing out that in default of payment of the fine, it would be a community service order. Is that in respect of that? I'm sorry, I seem to be having a little bit of technology challenge, Kimberly.
Yes.
So
all right. AG, we're just going to pause then, and so we can have that resolved, and then we'll come right back to you. All right? Thank you so much, AG. All right. So in respect of dual citizens, we did establish that once you're a dual citizen, assuming that you're a citizen of Jamaica and some other country, you still are able to enroll in the NIDS. How do they go about doing it?
Warren can speak about the process more, but If we look at clause 4 of the bill, once you are a citizen of Jamaica or whether you are ordinarily resident in Jamaica, you're eligible to enroll. And clause 4 proposes that citizens of Jamaica or those who have resided in Jamaica for a continuous period of 6 months immediately before applying for enrollment, they are eligible for enrollment in the NIDS.
Yes, thank you. Anything to add? No?
I think that is sufficient.
Okay,
So, yes.
all right. So if you are a dual citizen, you are definitely able to enroll in the NIDS. You should not have a challenge. Allow me to acknowledge our Minister of Education, Youth and Information, the Honorable Favourable Williams, who's joined us. Continuing with the questions, and we do have one here from Lauren Muthra, who posted on Instagram. And this question pertains to the NIDS and the church. And she wants to know whether the church might have played a role in, how the NIDS was received when it was initially indicated to the public.
Okay, I'll take that one. Of the over 300 consultation sessions facilitated by the NIDS team, churches accounted for a little above 30% of those sessions. And I can tell you that some of the best recommendations that we got came from the churches. Churches, in our view, are an important source of information. And a lot of those comments went into the design of the system. You'll be surprised the knowledge base that is there, and they're very interested in the system. They participate more than everybody else. And they provide you with very constructive criticism. In fact, they provide you with significant insights. So we are very close to the church, not only in terms of our own personal life, but the church is very important, and we have to work with the churches. In fact, most of our church leaders, chairman, they are JPs. Most of them are JPs. And we can't implement this system without the church. In fact, the trust that is required, especially even at the point of enrollment, we are going to need the church leaders to ensure that the integrity that is required to verify the utility bills, to verify the photographs and the birth certificates, that they are in fact doing it as it is.
Yes.
So it's very important for us.
Right.
We are aware, however, of some misinformation out there. And as a team, we will continue to engage the stakeholders. We'll continue to engage the people of Jamaica and to share the information. And we encourage everybody to check our social media pages. Go to nidsfacts.com and read what is there. And we are open. Send an email to contact us at nids.gov.jm and we will respond.
Yes.
Thanks.
I think let us not ignore the fact that there is a misconception that this NIDS bill is the government interfering in the privacy of the ordinary citizen. From where I sit, it has never been the intention that the government is doing this for the government's benefit. What I have no doubt in my mind, and we need to convey that to the public, this NIDS bill is for the benefit of the citizens of Jamaica. In other words, we want to facilitate the citizens to be able to access better service from the banks, the private institution, from the public sector. And we know from where we sit that so many Jamaicans have been affected by identity theft, by fraud, by corruption in the system, where people utilize their identification, so that we want to remove this misconception that the government is doing it for the government's benefit. To the best of my knowledge, both political parties for the last 30 years have been saying that we need this unique identification system. It is unfortunate that the previous NIDS bill was actually opposed, and that is because of the mandatory nature that was in that bill. And therefore, people may think that something is amiss why it was rejected by the Supreme Court. But we went back to base and we are putting a bill that is voluntary, and we want to make sure that the card, when it is actually issued is so efficient and effective that regardless of the voluntary nature of it, that 99% of our Jamaican citizens will see it fit to use it, because I know the NIDS team is determined that the citizens of Jamaica should have trust and confidence in the card, and with this card, Jamaicans will be happy to use.
Yes.
So any bad press has nothing to do with the church, nothing to do with anything. It's just that, anything new, anything that the government does, people believe that there's some underlying, some mischievous reason.
Yes.
So I want Jamaicans, and that is why we have come to Jamaicans in this town hall meetings. We have opened up the Joint Select Committee to let Jamaicans know you have skepticism, you have concerns, you have doubts, please bring it to our attention.
Yes. Thank you. A comment from Minister
Kimberly.
Smith. Yes.
Kimberly, I'm almost
I
provoked.
believe we're going to take the AG's question. Sorry, our comment now.
The question
Yes.
is causing a little provocation on my part, but I'm going to not yield to the provocation, because if I were to share with you some of what I heard during the hearing of the matter about the NIDS being equated to the mark of the beast and where that was coming from, I think perhaps that is what was being alluded to by the person who posed the question.
Yes.
But some of those will have to be shared on another occasion. As the minister has rightly said, this is take two, and we are addressing some of the concerns. But believe it or not, some unfortunate perspectives were shared and put out in the public domain, which I have no doubt would have influenced how it was viewed and received by segments of the public.
Yes, thank you so much, AG. And again, that is why it is so important that we have these consultations so we can do away with those misinformation. A comment from Minister Johnson Smith? Yes?
Thank you very much, Kimberly. I wanted to just follow on the points made by Minister Chuck just now, where he was speaking about, the benefits of the national ID in protecting citizens' security in respect of their IDs. But I think one of the things that we sometimes forget in the conversation is how much of a challenge life is without proper identification for many Jamaicans in disenfranchised or marginalized communities, in poor communities. So sometimes the conversation is held in a somewhat academic or philosophical context without actually looking at the needs that exist in society that are not being met by our current systems. Because if you look through, the newspapers or even Google, some of the stories that have come out about children who have not been in school and they are living on the margins of society, and it's recognized that their main barrier has been that they don't have a birth certificate, they don't have a family structure that's supporting around that, and the ability to have an identification card, your own card, that can be used or delivered to you from birth, that this is a benefit that will be a game changer in how our society is organized. I don't know if you remember the story about the 17-year-old who just didn't have a birth certificate. For years he had been out of school because he could not get registered and didn't have the support system to navigate the many bureaucratic layers that surround identification in this country. So I think we need to also not look about, people choosing the type of identification But we need to also remember the many people who do not have. And the government intends to give this free identification to each and every citizen is entitled to have it. And that, I think, is something that can take us leaps and bounds forward as a society that truly cares for the vulnerable, people who can be identified to access services. So sometimes you hear the questions that come, about, will I need it to access? But what about the people who are unable to access because they don't have any identification at all? And I think sometimes, we just need to, and this is why these four are so important. So I want to, Minister, thank you again for having this open forum so we can have these wider discussions as well. Yes. And just remember that there are many different people live very different experiences across the spectrum. And what this card is intended to do is to provide a benefit, ultimately, to each and every Jamaican citizen. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much,
I just
Minister.
want to add, thanks to your comments because they are so relevant. Let me say, Kimberly, and the public at large know the problem of identification is a serious challenge. I can tell you, there are many persons in the society who search for justice of the peace. And a justice of the peace, just because you find a JP, can't just say, I certify you as a person. The JP has to know who you are. And in fact, the justice of the peace, and I have had regular meetings with them, who indicate to me how important their service is to verify all people, people who are in their 70s and 80s, to verify that they're still alive, right? And also young people who want to be able to open an account at the bank. They have to search for JP. They can't find a JP. And the JP, even when they find them, the JP are reluctant. So with this card, a lot of the misinformation or the challenges of persons will be overcome.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Yes. A comment from Minister Williams.
Yes, I support wholeheartedly what you've said about this being so important as a form of ID, because in the education sector currently, today, the government has made available to families $20,000 towards the purchase of a laptop or tablet. We have been unable to give it to all 36,000 families because the persons who have registered or trying to register, their name, their TRN, their date of birth don't match. And so we can't go any further. We have to, try to help them together with the Tax Administration of Jamaica to see who is this person, and it takes days, weeks to, try to work it out. So it is important that we have a strong national ID, especially when it comes to government benefits to be issued to its citizens.
Minister Williams, you will also know as a Member of Parliament the challenges for MPs. We may decide that we want to assist 10 persons in a community. We can't just do it like that, We recommend the 10 persons to, say, RADA, or to the sports entity, or to some government agency. The government agency has to check those 10 persons. When the government agency goes into the community, they can't find the 10 persons. And even when the person says, but I am this person that, I may have recommended, the government agency will say, but how do I know you are the person? And frequently the person has to come back to the constituency office to be verified by the constituency secretary that this is the person that we want to give the benefit. So you can see immediately with a national ID, any benefit that government has to provide, it will become so easy.
Yes. Thank you so much, ministers, and thank you, Minister Johnson-Smith, for situating the debate in the context of reality and the real-world impact that it will have on Jamaicans. Very, very important, and also the importance of it in terms of the schools and assisting students to get the resources that they also need. I do want to ask this question that has been posted. Well, actually, we do have Matthew McNaughton on Zoom. I want to know if Matthew is ready with his question. No? Okay.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, all right. We'll take Matthew now. Go ahead, Matthew.
Thank you very much. Good night, everyone. Good greetings to the members of the Joint Select Committee, the AG, who is also on Zoom. I have a question, a two-part question, but I did want to, just make a caveat about some of the comments that were just shared, because I think we really have to be careful about the suggestions of the linking of these ID systems to, for example, government beneficiary programs. We are seeing a growing body of knowledge and kind of research, for example, with Aadhaar in India, that says that they actually lead to and support exclusion through false negatives. I'm happy to share kind of some of that research on that. So there's a lot of promises and kind of benefits from broadening access to ID systems, but it's not the case that just because we are introducing them that they necessarily result in kind of an expansion of that. So just a quick caveat there. Thank you also. I guess the question that I did have for the group, I just wanted to confirm something, and then I guess I can ask the question, is whether the intention, and Warren, thank you. I mean, I think the team, you guys have done a really good job the last couple of weeks talking about and kind of explaining the bill, but I think there's some things that I wanted to zoom in on. So one, is the intention of the GOJ broadly, you mentioned intention to start issuing of cards in September, or potentially collecting information for cards. So is it the intention of the GOJ to move forward with the operationalization of NIDS in the absence of the operationalization of the Data Protection Act? And by that, I mean both the establishment of the office, but also the enforcement of the act and the publication of regulations associated with that.
All right, thank you, Matthew. We'll just get a response to that, and then we'll move on to your other question if you have any.
But I think it's fair to say that the Data Protection Act has already been tabled and passed in Parliament. What is holding it up, Matthew, to the best of my knowledge, is the completion of the regulations. And once these are completed, the likelihood is that that body, the data protection body, yes, will be set up. I suspect that it will be a matter of months before everything is come into operation. I can't give you an exact date, but I know the government that is working to put it into operation, and there's a real likelihood, I can't give you a date, and we hope it will be before the implementation of the NIDS bill.
All right, Matthew, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, he has another question he wanted.
So, just to amplify your response, Kimberly, are you hearing me?
Yes, AG, we're hearing you.
Right. I think to amplify Minister's response is that the implementation of the Data Protection Act will be critical to the implementation of the NIDS law.
Okay, yes. All right. Thank you so much, AG. Critical to the implementation.
Right. And I believe, and Mr. Vernon can correct me if I'm wrong, but that when he spoke about the September date, what he spoke about was our technical capacity to deliver as at September. Not that we are going live at September. He was saying that where we are in terms of the technical work that's being done,
yes,
building out of the security platforms and protocols, etc., we will be in a position, as at September 1, all things remaining equal, to start that process. So he didn't say we're going live in September.
Okay.
So just to
yes,
clarify that point as well.
That's a very important clarification.
And I can also, reinforce that point that when I made that assertion, we were really talking about our technical capabilities and having the infrastructure and the system in place. But we are very much aware that the legal framework, and there's a lot of work going on in the background now because the government is currently working with PwC Pricewaterhouse and Coopers, which is really public information, to look at the transformation of the RGD, and not only the transformation of the RGD, but to flesh out an organization structure, all of the job descriptions and the processes for the establishment of the National Identification and Registration Authority. Additionally, the Databases Inspectorate to provide the additional oversight. And if you look at the NIDS bill, the entire NIDS bill is intertwined with the Data Protection Act. It's a very crucial component. We're also aware, and would have seen it in the papers, where MSET, Technology Ministries, would have advertised positions to create the Information Commissioner's Office. So that is a very important part. And again, I will repeat, the assertions from policymakers, the directives that we got, is that all of the oversight mechanism must be in place before we go live. Naturally, in the background, because you're building a system and you're designing, you have to test, you have to put data in, but we are not going to go live until all of the controls, the legislative framework, and all of those things are in place.
All right. Thank you so much. So the Data Protection Act, as well as the NIDS, go hand in hand, right? And so one will not proceed without the other. Yes?
I think Matthew has his question now.
Matthew, do you have a question?
That was a preliminary point he wanted to hear.
Shall we take your question now, Matthew?
Yeah, man. Thanks.
Perfect.
Thanks, Minister Park. No, the second part I think is really just building on what Mr. Vernon just mentioned, because I agree. I think they're very intricately linked, and there are things that are within this bill that would be covered in the regulation for that. So, for example, if we take, for example, clause 24 related to disclosure. And this is something that came up in, I think, the second meeting, JSC meeting, around the sharing of information with the police force based on a approval by a judge and request by the Commissioner of Police. Something that would be, for example, handled within the context of the Data Protection Act is the transfer of information between two data subjects. So there was a question that was asked by one of the senators in that meeting, and the response was initially that, well, the police would become the data custodian in that regard, but as an individual, this bill, or at least maybe in the operational, the regulations might talk about, well, if my record has been shared or disclosed to the police or another entity, I would not be aware of that, because I would not have, because of this process that's set up, that's not consented. I have not consented into that. And so we see, for example, this area where information can potentially be moving from NERO to an external body, and it's unclear what the legislative operational framework for how information moves between data subjects within the context of the work. So there are a few others. I don't want to kind of hog the time, but it's really critical that we do operationalize the Data Protection Act, and that by that the full operationalization that is done. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. And I believe your point has been very well made. Minister, do you have a comment on what he has said?
The truth of the matter is that Matt is quite right. A fair amount of regulations are necessary to operationalize the bill. And to the best of my knowledge, maybe Warren can highlight some more, we're trying to work for the regulations to be almost simultaneous in the debate of this bill, because I know a number of senators and parliamentarians have indicated that apart from a bill, the fine print is really in the regulations. So that, Matthew, you're quite right. So I've asked the Secretariat, and I know it's being worked on, so that the regulation, as I understand, is in draft form. But as we debate the bill, questions like yours, Matthew, come up, and when the matter is discussed at the Joint Select Committee and also in the House, that the regulations will continue in draft form until the bill is passed in the House and the Senate before it is finalized. but we are expecting a draft regulation so that when we debate it in the House and in the Senate, senators and members of Parliament will have some idea what is in the regulations.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can confirm that we have most of the regulations already prepared. We just need to update them to reflect, what is in the new bill, and also to reflect, as Chairman mentioned, any new inputs from the public. But I also need to add that we are not to just single out the police. We're not to single out the police. And why am I saying this? Because the police would be a data controller, similar to how the private sector entities, banks and so on, they're all data controllers. But it is important again for us to note that the role of the National Identification and Registration Authority as proposed in this bill is to disclose identity information based on a request from the identity owner. However, naturally, for national security purposes, if, for example, a policeman, you locate a deceased person and you want to know who that person is, you have no identification at all, there has to be a process. The process is already defined there for them to submit a request for us to say, who is this person? All we are doing is disclosing to say, this is the person. We are not sharing fingerprints. We are not sharing sensitive information. There is no special provisions in the bill for us to disclose the sensitive information. All we are doing is to say who you are based on the information that we receive. In fact, this bill, the data set that we are capturing is so limited, specifically for identity information. In fact, when we were doing this bill, we looked at the KYC requirement. Some of the information that you're seeing there for address, telephone number, and so on, is because those are connected to the know your customer requirement and really so that financial institutions can use this. Because one of the main reasons for this is that there are many poor people out there who don't have access to the formal financial system. And you can't grow wealth or succeed in this life if you are not connected. Personally, if you don't have a bank account, you're not going to go anywhere in this world. It's very important. You need access. Poor people need access to the formal financial system to put something away, as my grandmother would say, for a rainy day. It's very important. In fact, even benefits, government benefits. Even when you look earlier in the pandemic, many people didn't get their benefits. Why? Because they don't have a proper bank account. I will tell you, the problems out there are real. There are some people out there facing the problem. Chairman, you and I, we have bank accounts and we have proper ID, but there are many people out there that I know who don't have this. And that is why we are working hard to help them. It's very important that we understand the context that NIDS is specifically for identity verification, where we can say without any doubt that the person that is on the face of the card is in fact who they say they are, and that identity is connected to a birth certificate. That is that person's birth certificate. Yes. It's very important.
But in further support of what you've said, Jamaica is moving very fast into the digital age. And when we move into the digital age, everything will be done technologically. There won't be a GP or a minister or an MP or a councillor to verify who you are. You're going to need a technologically suitable card or identification. I want to tell many persons know, before long, when you go to a supermarket or you go to a store, you won't see anybody, You go inside the store, you take what you want, you go to the cash register, you show your ID card, and you use your credit card, and you pay, and all that time you may see a security guard watching to see if in fact you're going through the right process. It is now happening in many countries of the world, where you just use your credit card, your identification card, and move along. So that is why Jamaica, like all other countries, need this unique identification card that can be trustworthy and reliable.
Yes.
And one more point,
Yes.
Chairman. When we get this tool, there's nothing going to prevent us from moving a lot of these services online. If you have, the reason why you go into the tax office to sell your motor vehicle is because they want to make sure it's you selling the motor vehicle. If you look at Estonia, Singapore, and all of those countries, Finland, they are doing these things because they are able to verify who you are using this tool from behind a computer screen. So it is very important for us to move forward.
Right, very, very important. Thank you so much. The main takeaway from the discussion, the exchange just now, is that the NIDS represents access, effectiveness, and efficiency, but most importantly, access for the average person to access, for example, the banking sector. Very, very important. I have a question from Mr. Horace MacDonald. And Horace is asking, what will protect us from any government simply changing the legislation to access the data that NIDS has or to ask that NIDS collects additional data? What protection exists to prevent this kind of thing?
I can't see any government, breaching the trust that we are putting in this bill. In other words, you take the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission legislation says that the fingerprint and information can only be used for electoral purposes. And even though people say, why don't you use the Electoral Commission and get the fingerprint? It just can't be done because the law protects that information that is in the Election Commission database. Fine. Yes. And to say that any future government can change the law and just open up, the data collected, I would find that not only would there be uproar, that government would not be able to withstand the electorate, at the next election.
Yes. Thank you, Minister. I would like to take the time to acknowledge Mr. Hugh Graham. Thank you for being with us this evening, sir. And Mr. MacDonald, there you go. Giving access to the information when it's collected within such a limited way would be tantamount to a breach of trust, which no government would want to be faced with. So now we do have just a few more minutes before we have to close this evening. But I want to ask this question. What happens when a person dies? How does the NIDS registry know that that person is deceased? And I suspect also what happens with their information.
Okay. So, again, if that person is registered under the National Identification System, automatically that birth certificate is protected. So we would have given the example before with life certificates, because at the point that there's a registration in the death register, what will happen is that that notification will automatically be sent to the identity system to inform that system that that person is no longer alive. And there are a number of things that will happen there, because the people who process pension, when they run their report, they will know that the person is no longer alive. That person has maybe an insurance policy and they are beneficiaries. The insurance companies will be able to check and verify if the person is alive. So there are a number of benefits, even in government, where when you read the news on a daily basis, where there are a lot of benefits that are going out to people who basically are not alive when they are unable to verify that. So the billions of dollars that you hear the entities in government that are responsible for auditing, this will help in that regard to fix those problems. So sorry to extend all the way, but just to sort of bring clarity to the point.
Yes.
And in addition to, we have a situation now with the electoral list. You have a few thousand people who remain on the electoral list who have died. And although, we're trying to clean up the electoral list, the election commissioners have to be assured by a death certificate from the Registrar General before they remove the person from the electoral list. Now, with the Registrar General coming under the NIRA, one would expect that once a person has died and it is registered, it automatically, almost as a matter of seconds, that it will, the NIN number would immediately be retired because that person has died. So that the pension scheme, the banks, everyone could easily check with the NIRA to ensure that what has happened, that this person has died. So you can see when you have the Registrar General coming within this NIRA, birth, death, and the national identification system will move hand in hand.
Yes.
So you can see the efficiency behind the whole system.
Absolutely. I believe the AG had a comment, and we're going to go ahead and take that now. Thank you so much for your patience, AG.
Thank you, Kimberly. One of the challenges that I think this laudable approach of combining the Joint Select Committee to review the bill with the town hall is that the appetite of the public for the knowledge about the NIDS and the concepts perhaps is not enabling us sufficiently to look at what is provided for in the law. So the question that Matthew McNaughton had posed about the Data Protection Act and the sufficiency of the protection that is to be given, Clause 6 of the bill mandates the Board of Management of the NIRA to develop policies and procedures for, among other things, the safe custody and, where required, disposal of all identity information collected or obtained by the authority or stored in the databases. The collection, policies and procedures for the collection and reproduction of information obtained as required under the Act. Also for ensuring that the operations of the authority are in conformity with the Data Protection Act, the Financial Administration and Audit Act, the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act, and all other relevant laws that are relevant to the management of public bodies. Also, it mandates the development of policies and procedures for a number of other things. Although the Supreme Court seemed to have been able to adjudge the effectiveness and the adequacy of the policies and procedures before they were developed, it will be very difficult to really say whether those policies and procedures are adequate unless we know exactly what they are. So the provision here, I'm just thinking, because it was one of the issues that was raised in the case, beyond the development of the policies and procedures, should the provision go a little further to say what is done with it? How do you communicate what those procedures are if someone wants to know exactly what is in place, whether it is adequate? So for me, just saying, Minister Chuck, while I understand that most of the persons who are tuned in really want to hear more about the NIDS, and this is precisely why the forum is convened, we also have to strike a balance with looking at the adequacy of the provisions and whether we need to relook at the language of what is in the law. Have the provisions gone far enough? Have they gone too far? Will the words used achieve the objectives that we are seeking? It's something about the intention of Parliament.
Right. And, you know, a very interesting point you noted, AG, which answers Matthew McNaughton's point very well, which I must admit I didn't even appreciate, where it says in section 6.1b, ensure that the operations of the authority are in conformity with the Data Protection Act. So that, obviously, this bill cannot come into operation until the Data Protection Act has come into operation, because you can't be in conformity with it unless it is in operation. So that the answer to your question, Matthew, earlier, is that yes, the Data Protection Act will have to come into operation before this act can actually come into operation, which is consistent, AG, with what the Supreme Court indicated, that there must be that level of protection of the data, right?
Mr. Chuck, for me, I'm still puzzled to know how one can assess whether provisions are adequate and sufficient for achieving a particular perspective unless you know what those provisions are, because that determination cannot be made without an examination of those. So that work is ongoing, and as I think Minister Johnson-Smith had pointed out, that it is the intention to ensure that everything is in place administratively before it is launched.
Thank you so much. Do you have a comment, Minister Johnson-Smith? No? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for making that excellent point, AG. And I believe you also mentioned that there were some other acts to which the NIDS must also be in conformity in order for it to be most effective. With just 3 minutes to go, we have once again come to the end of a very, very engaging session. I find that these are very, very helpful. And so we must close the curtains at this time on this session. It was indeed quite a comprehensive evening. We did look at some elements, some of the clauses, and we did answer some of your questions. We do continue to encourage you to participate online, to continue the conversation online using the hashtag JCNIDS. And you can find the bill on the Jamaica Parliament's website. And I believe I detailed earlier how you might find it if you're unable to do so. And there was a suggestion that a NIDS booklet should be placed in the police station so that citizens may be able to access it. And I believe Minister Chuck said that that's something that was being looked into in coordination with the justices of the peace, right? So thank you so much for joining us. We will be here once again tomorrow, same time, same place, for more information on the NIDS. And it's quite likely that we will have some special guests who will be telling us how the NIDS will potentially transform their operations. I'm Kimberly MacLeod. Thank you, and I hand you back to our chairman.
Thank you very much, Kimberly, for your usual efficient manner in keeping us engaged with the public. I certainly would like to thank members of the Joint Select Committee. Amazingly, we have today 8 members actually here in the banquet hall. I want to thank Ministers Johnson-Smith, Marsha Smith, Robert Morgan, Minister Favour Williams, and also MP Dwight Sibbles and Hugh Graham and Senator Charles Sinclair, who's all the way from Montego Bay and heads back out to Montego Bay shortly. Safe drive home. And thank AG for participating on Zoom, and also to the other members who I know are listening. There are 15 members of the committee, and we are all very interested in what the members of the public are actually engaged with. I would like to thank the members of the NIDS Secretariat, Mrs. Hemmings Allison, Mrs. Miller Williams, and the project director, Mr. Warren Vernon, and Kamika Facey, who was online with us. Tomorrow is our final virtual town hall meeting. Members of the public, please, if your questions have not been answered, please send them still, and we will try to respond to them as much as possible, because this must be a very open and transparent process, so that when we meet tomorrow, we will try and respond to some of the remaining questions that were not answered. But I think tomorrow we have some government agencies who will be with us to see how the NIDS bill could be beneficial to the work of these government agencies. And in future, we expect that they will detail more to the public at large how generally the NIDS bill or the NIDS card itself can be more effectively utilized. I want to thank the viewers and listeners who remain with us. And you can inform your friends and family that they can join us tomorrow for the final virtual town hall meetings of the Joint Select Committee. We have come to the end of our meeting this afternoon, and I now ask for a motion for adjournment. So moved and seconded. Meeting adjourned until 5:30 tomorrow afternoon at the banquet hall.
The new NIDS bill has been drafted and is ready for review. We want to hear from you. Go to www.japarliament.gov.jm to download a copy of the new bill. Join the conversation. Make a written submission to Clerk to the Houses, Gordon House, 81 Duke Street, Kingston, or via email clark@japarliament.gov.jm. All written submissions must be sent by Friday, January 29, 2021. Join the process. Let your voice be heard.